True Devotion to Mary, video number 12. St. Louis de Montfort, continuing on with the different types of false devotees to the Blessed Virgin Mary in this month of May, dedicated traditionally to the Most Blessed Virgin Mary. And the hypocritical devotees is the one identified after the inconstant devotee. The hypocritical devotee is, we have still to mention the false devotees to our Blessed Lady, who are the hypocritical devotees, who cloak their sins and sinful habits with her mantle, in order to be taken by men for what they are not. The next one, the seventh one, is the interested devotees. There are also the interested devotees who have recourse to Our Lady only to gain some lawsuit, or to avoid some danger, or to be cured of some illness, or for some other similar necessity, without which they would forget her altogether. All these are false devotees, pleasing neither to God nor to His Holy Mother. Oh my God, help us. In his sermons, in a book called The Sermons of the Cure of Ars, Saint John Vianney, the Cure of Ars, says about prayers like that, about prayers for cures. He said, some of you only pray for cures, to be delivered from an illness. And he made a remark about it, which I forgot the point of it, but he actually mentioned that, about people who just go to God for the cure. And he had something to say about it. If I remember it, I'll mention it. Let us then take great care not to be of the number of the critical devotees who believe nothing and criticize everything, nor of the scrupulous devotees who are afraid of being too devout to Our Lady out of respect to our Lord, nor of the exterior devotees who make all their devotion consist in outward practices, nor of the presumptuous devotees who, under the pretext of their false devotion to the Blessed Virgin, wallow in their sins, nor of the inconstant devotees who from levity change their practices of devotion or give them up altogether, or at the least temptation, nor of the hypocritical devotees who join confraternities and wear the liveries of the Blessed Virgin Mary in order to pass for good example, good people, nor finally of the interested devotees who have recourse to Our Lady only to be delivered from bodily evils or to obtain temporal goods. Article 2, True Devotion to the Blessed Virgin Mary. Now he begins to explain what true devotion to the Blessed Virgin Mary is, after having described what it is not. And so he describes first, quote, characteristics, page 65. After having laid bare and condemned the false devotions to the Most Holy Virgin, we must, in a few words, give the characteristics of true devotion. It must be 1, interior, 2, tender, 3, holy, 4, constant, 5, disinterested. Interior, tender, holy, constant, and disinterested. What does he mean by interior? True devotion to Our Lady is interior. That is, it comes from the mind and the heart. It flows from the esteem we have for her, the high idea we have formed of her greatness, and the love which we have for her. How can you form that unless you read about her? Read the Glories of Mary. It's so big of a volume, you'll retain a lot of the examples of the power of the Blessed Virgin Mary. And if you want it, it's on PDF. 2, it is tender. What does that mean? It's full of confidence in her, like a child's confidence in his own loving mother. This confidence makes the soul have recourse to her in all its bodily and mental necessities. Don't you just love this? Which, with much simplicity, trust, and tenderness. It's beautiful, isn't it? It implores the aid of its good mother at all times, in all places, and above all things. In its doubts, that it may be enlightened. In its wanderings, that it may be brought into the right path. In its temptations, that it may be supported. In its weaknesses, that it may be strengthened. In its falls, that it may be lifted up. In discouragement, that it may be cheered. In its scruples, that they may be taken away. In the crosses, toils, and disappointments of life, that it may be consoled under them. In a word, in all the evils of body and mind and soul. The soul ordinarily has recourse to Mary without fear of annoying her or displeasing Jesus Christ. At the beginning of this, I mentioned that I was a boy lying down in bed. I reached out my hand and I asked the Blessed Virgin Mary. I called out to her by name and I said, please hold my hand. And I said, I won't look, just hold my hand. And I reached out my left hand. I held it up until it got tired. I lowered it. I was disappointed. I said, I thought you were going to hold my hand. I wanted to feel her hand, but I didn't. Well, 41 years later, I felt the effects of her having held my hand since that moment. Faith is evidence of that which we cannot see or feel. She held my hand. Far greater than I was expecting. What prompted that prayer for her to hold my hand was God Himself. I'm not capable of a good thought, certainly not of prayer, without God first moving me to utter the words, to complete the act. And so the prayer, hold my hand, Blessed Mother, was providentially motivated by grace. Not only did she hold my hand, without interfering with my free will to do what was wrong, she never let go of it. Second example, I have a good friend who was being chased by a thug when my friend was just a young boy. He is one of the finest people I know. And he's not eccentric or anything else, in my estimation. He was being chased by this thug. He was scared. It was in grammar school. And he was cornered, trapped in a basement of a school. And then this big guy got him. My friend said, Mother Mary, help me. And this big thug went to punch him. As soon as he called out the Blessed Mother's name, the guy went, ow! And he ran. And he only told me that after knowing him really well. He didn't let that one out too soon, fearing that somebody might think he was perhaps exaggerating. Why should we doubt these things? He called on the Blessed Mother, and she protected him from being injured. Isn't that amazing? After I asked the Blessed Mother to hold my hand, because the years have now passed so many years, I don't know how old I was, but I guesstimated as a preteen in the age of about 7 or 8. Just a couple of years later, I was given something very special to me, and I'll share it with you. I didn't know what it was. All I knew was what my mother said about it. All right? And I'll show it to you. She talked about the power of Mary. And she said how important it was to be devoted to her and to pray to her. She said this very quickly and summarized it by showing me something very special. She was talking about this in the kitchen. Now, this was a couple of years after I asked Mary to hold my hand. Isn't it amazing that a young little boy didn't lose faith? This is how you know faith is supernatural. I was a little kid. I asked Mary to hold my hand. I was told believe in her. She didn't do it. Why would I still believe? Is there any more need of proof than that faith is a supernatural deposit of God's life in your soul? There's no evidence to believe. I didn't get what I wanted. I didn't lose faith at all. I just said to myself, she didn't hold my hand. And then I went on from there. I didn't lose faith at all. If faith were not supernatural, I would have said, I didn't get what I asked for. I'm not believing in this anymore. A couple of years later, my mother's in the kitchen talking to her sister and one of my sisters. So my aunt and one of my sisters. My mother had come back from a post-Vatican II healing mass at the local parish. Beautiful St. Francis Xavier Church in Park Slope, Brooklyn, on Carroll Street and 6th Avenue. Gorgeous church. Diagonally across from this church now is an ugly icon of some pantheistic religion. It's disgusting. Google it. You'll see it. Diagonally across from the church is this ugly thing, which is directly across the church from the school's convent, wherein lives Sister Kathleen, Sister Margaret, Sister Helene, still today, even though they're getting up there. My mother's talking about this thing after she gets back from this ruckus. Now, they still had remnants of the faith, you know? Can't condemn everybody, right? But during this healing mass, she says, I remember she used the word power. She's very powerful, she said. She held up this thing. This is from Mary. I said, can I have that? She gave it to me. It's been with me ever since. I consider that one of the signal graces. The one being when I was a child, asked her to hold my hand. This being a second one, where Mary interceded specifically on my behalf. It's no mistake that I got the green scapular. So anyway, she protects you. I can't emphasize that enough. So, it must be holy. This is the third characteristic. It must be interior, tender, now holy. What is holy? True devotion to Our Lady is holy. That is to say, it leads the soul to avoid sin and to imitate the virtues of the Blessed Virgin, particularly her profound humility, her lively faith, her blind obedience, her continual prayer, her universal mortification, her divine purity, her ardent charity, her heroic patience, her angelic sweetness, and her divine wisdom. These are the 10 principal virtues of the Most Holy Virgin. Let me say them again. Blind obedience, lively faith, profound humility, continual prayer. Prayer is a virtue. What is virtue? It's a good habit. Her universal mortification, her divine purity, her ardent charity, her heroic patience, angelic sweetness, and divine wisdom. How brilliant is the Blessed Mother. And it must be constant. This is the fourth characteristic. True devotion to Our Lady is constant. It confirms the soul in good and does not let it easily abandon its spiritual exercises. It makes it courageous in opposing the world in its fashions and maxims, the flesh in its weariness and passions, and the devil in his temptations. It makes the soul courageous in opposing the world's fashions, maxims, the flesh in its weariness and passions, and the devil in his temptations, so that a person truly devoted to our Blessed Lady is neither changeable, irritable, scrupulous, nor timid. It is not that such a person does not fall, no, or change sometimes in the sensible feelings of devotion, no. But when he falls, he gets up again by stretching out his hand to his good mother. How about that? Isn't that what I did? I literally stretched out my hand. Isn't that something? When he loses the taste and relish of devotion, he does not become disturbed because of that? No. For the just and faithful client of Mary lives by faith, Hebrews 10:38, of Jesus and Mary, and not by natural sentiment. Isn't that what I just said? She didn't hold my hand as I thought she would. Bishop Robert McKenna, now deceased, said to those who became slaves of the Blessed Virgin Mary, which is what this is aiming toward, slaves of Jesus Christ through the Blessed Virgin Mary. At the end of this book, St. Louis de Montfort will have you make a consecration of yourself and all of your possessions, all of the merits of all your good works, and you give them to Mary, he says, because she knows what to do with them. So I think at 17.5 minutes, I'll finish at that one. And we'll pick up on the next one. So that concludes this video of true devotion to Mary, leading up to the consecration of oneself to Jesus Christ as a slave through Mary. See you on the next one. Thank you.